We are all here every week enjoying JETI talk from whatever. If you feel like you have something to share, doesn't have to be important, doesn't have to be, changing a life, an interesting story, an interesting journey, something that you know about, please contact the office if you'd be willing to do this. This is a community venture and we need the community to do that. We're working really hard on finding people.
Okay.
And it will end sooner than later without you. Thank you.
And also we have some Emmanuel friends who have joined us because Dave Snyderman and I go to hear and Sandy Greenhouse, we go to hear the continuing medical education at L&M. And so Dave circulated to his colleagues at Emmanuel. But Ella's right, it's a community thing and we're too small a community not to share in each other's stuff. Shall I get started, Kathleen?
Yes, let me just say one word. First of all, welcome, Dan. We really appreciate you doing this. And second of all, given that we do have Temple Emmanuel friends here, please spread the word at Temple Emmanuel. We would love to have speakers from outside of Bethel if anyone's interested in giving a talk.
Okay.
And if everybody could now mute themselves so that they...
Wait, excuse me, is this every Wednesday evening at 6:30?
Yes, it is. Sometimes we skip one. So for in the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, there won't be one.
Okay, thank you.
So you do have to check the schedule.
Okay, shall I start, Kathleen?
Yes, and once again, if everyone could mute themselves.
Okay. So this is alliteratively called Critical Components COVID Crisis. And then later on, I'll try to lighten things up by talking about coping calmly with COVID crisis. Now, it's a natural question. Why is a psychiatrist giving this talk, right? And I think the simple answer is I don't know that we have in either congregation a virologist or an infectious diseases person. And I have long thought of myself as genus physician, species psychiatrist. So my interest is in medicine as a whole. If we had had hospitalists decades ago when I went to medical school, I probably would have been a family doctor or an internist, but that wasn't the path I took. I'll just mention quickly some of the sources of the data that I'm saying today, and I'm not claiming that everything I say is accurate. I'm happy to hear additions, corrections, critiques later on when we get to the question and answer time, because this is such an incredibly rapidly unfolding story. I'll tell you later on some things I heard at 4 p.m. today as an illustration of how this is constantly unfolding. So some of my sources have been continuing medical education lectures, and it's interesting how the one we heard in May didn't have a lot of the stuff that we had just a month or two ago because there is so much information coming in. CNN's Drs. Fauci and Gupta, who I think are wonderful, the New York Times, medical journals, and I apologize for reading. I'm not like Jerry Fisher, Bruce Levine, Stan Solinsky, or Karen Rosenberg. I cannot give and never give talks without notes. So please understand, I'll be looking down a lot, but hopefully you can hear me. If somebody can't hear me, somebody can signal me. Now on my screen, I'm still small and I see everybody else, which is fine, but you said you didn't want that, Kathleen, is that right?
Ella taught me how to do it so that it will work out just fine. So.
Beautiful, beautiful, good. So as Dr. Tom Frieden, a former CDC head, said, we're tired of the virus, but the virus isn't tired of us, okay? The virus is having just a lovely time from its point of view all over the country. At one point within the past week, every single one of the 50 states was having increasing virus cases. Because there's a massive amount of data, I'm going to this talk organized around what we psychiatrists call, but it's a very useful way to organize a lot of data about people, a biopsychosocial talk. And I have a hunch, one of my, I'll talk about an irrationality of mine. I'm often worried when I give a talk, it doesn't matter whether it's to colleagues, students, the library, I'm often worried, oh, I won't have enough to say. Well, those of you who know me and my verbalness or verbosity know that that's an irrational thing for me to be worried about. I think I have enough to say. And furthermore, I'm going to maybe probably ask to have at some other point an extension, because I have a hunch I'm not even going to get, I'll barely get through all of biology today. And what I'm going to do is something atypical, but at, let's say 7 to 7:05, I'll stop and ask for questions, because I may stir up some questions, and then I'll go on. But I'll be surprised if I get to the psychosocial stuff. Okay. So what is the major biologic issue with this novel coronavirus? Can people participate if they have a thought what the major issue is, or should I leap to saying it? If people want to raise their hands and say what the major, I'll say it. I'll just say it. The major issue, I think, is how much we don't know, right? Just this thing is correctly called the novel coronavirus because it's unlike anything we bumped up against in a long time, maybe in 102 years from when we had that last major pandemic starting in 1918. So there's much we don't know. We don't even know what we don't know. And we also probably, there are questions that we haven't even thought of. Now, I was going to ask this, but I think maybe that's a little cumbersome. So just raise your hands. How many have heard the term long haulers? Okay, not a whole bunch, not a whole bunch. So let me mention to you what that is. The estimate of the long haulers refers to people who've had COVID of varying degrees of severity, not necessarily, it doesn't correlate with the severity of the infection, but they then afterwards have a disturbing number of chronic symptoms, very significantly cardiovascular and neurologic. And they can go for months, and we don't know how long they can go for. Another thing we don't know is whether somebody who has a completely asymptomatic infection, will they later on develop symptomatology that is consequential for the quality of their life. So there is, as I will say multiple times, there's a boatload we don't know. So the current estimate for long haulers is 15 to 25% of folks who get COVID. That is not trivial. That's, I think, an extremely significant number. But interestingly, when it was first talked about, the original assumption about COVID was 97 to 99% of people got COVID and got over it. And that is looking like that's absolutely not the case. Disturbingly, it's not correlated with the severity of the illness. And this has implications for the young who think they're invulnerable to stuff, but who would be very happy, unhappy rather. They'd be happy if it were true, but they'd be very unhappy to find out that their athletic abilities, let's say, were diminished because of a COVID infection. Interestingly, CNN and the World Health Organization, when they list cases, I think the World Health Organization lists cases, recovered, died. But what is omitted, and I think at this point appropriately omitted because we don't know, what is omitted is the long haulers. But that's just one of the many things we don't know. One of the things about this virus, and hopefully my healthcare colleagues can add on later on, is it's disgracefully undiscriminating, okay? Many viruses, undiscriminating in the myriad organ systems that it attacks. Okay, many viruses that we know about, like the hepatitis virus, pretty much attacks the liver. I don't know, some of my primary care colleagues can tell me if it also attacks other organs, but it certainly attacks the liver. The polio virus attacks the nervous system. COVID is more like herpes in that it can attack multiple systems, but I think with COVID is even more sites. So among the organs that COVID attacks are lung, heart, kidneys, gastrointestinal tract, skin, nervous system, and clots that can be spread all over the body and can lead to, in essence, micro strokes or micro blood vessel blockages all over the body. I hadn't heard about the pancreas being affected. So a couple days ago, I Googled, and yes, COVID can present with pancreatitis, which is a nasty, very painful inflammation of the pancreas. Now, currently, we are having an absolute tsunami explosion of cases. It took 3 months until April 28 to reach 1 million cases in America. Now we had 1 million cases in the past week, exclamation mark. Okay, that's mind-boggling. The recent record, and I don't know today's, this was a day or two, was 184,000 cases in one day. Okay, that's why we had 1 million in a week. So that was versus 20 to 60,000 a day. And it's recently been increasing. Some days it's increasing in 47 states, other days in 45, other days in all 50. So it's just exploding. And a major question is, why the spike? So the conventional wisdom, and it makes sense, is that it was predicted that it would increase, the COVID cases would increase with going indoors, because going indoors, and especially poorly ventilated places indoors, have far more risks associated. But I wonder whether there may be more. Now, how many of you have, just again, raise hands. This is great that I can see everybody. How many of you have heard of mutations of the COVID virus? Oh, good. Okay. And then maybe you've heard of the fact that the mutation, at least that we know of so far, the one that I've heard 4 or 5 times in the past 4 or 5 months, has been a mutation in terms of greater infectivity. Supposedly 10 times more infective, which I think, but Sandy or Claire, somebody will correct me, I think means you need 1/10 the viral load to get an infection. And so to me, the explosion that we're seeing in the past few weeks, it's hard for me to think. It may purely be exponential growth, but I wouldn't think that all of a sudden people have been so uncareful and so super spreading. But I don't know that. That's just my thought, that it may be a mixture of going indoors as well as greater infectivity. Okay, possible marker might be flu cases, I think. In other words, if flu cases stay around 20,000, but COVID is exploding, that might argue that we are being relatively careful, but it's just much easier to get COVID. If flu cases go to 60, 70,000, as it is in some years, then it may be the indoor phenomenon. But for whatever reason, it is unequivocally exploding. It's mind-boggling when you think it took 2.5 months to get to 1 million cases, and in 1 week we had 1 million cases. So in terms of, let me talk now a little bit about immunity. In terms of natural immunity, not so much is known. Most crucially, the question is, how long does it last and how immune are we? There have been a few cases of reinfection. I don't know about the age of the folks, whether they were immune compromised, whether there were unknown factors, but the fact that people can get it and then 4 months later, 5 months later, get it again is not a pleasant fact, okay? Fortunately, it's a very small number of folks for whom that happens, but it does raise questions about how long antibodies last and things like that. Vaccines are more unknown because they're more recent. The reports that we have are only press releases. So as one physician said, they're for the stockholders. They're not study data. They're not peer-reviewed journal articles, just study data. So Pfizer said that its vaccine was effective at a 90% rate 7 days after the second infection. But that doesn't say how long that protection lasts. So there's really, you know, and I'll explain later on why, especially folks of our age, and I see this is mostly a mature audience, why folks of our age have to continue to be quite careful. Another thing about the Pfizer study that is puzzling to me is it was a very small N. So that was the third phase trial, which had 15,000 people in the vaccinated group, 15,000 people in the placebo group. And in such a large group, they only had 95 infections, okay? 86 were people in the placebo group, 9 were in the folks who got the vaccine. Now, if you think that they had 30,000 people, if they had 300 infections, that would be 1% of 30,000 people. But they didn't even have 1%. And given the number of cases that we have in the country, that's a puzzlingly low incidence of infections. And I wonder if in their study, they found out how many people were wearing masks. I wonder, for example, if the people, you know, if there's a difference in mask wearing, but it just seems to me, and statistics was a weak link in my education, but it still seems to me like that's a tiny number of folks to become infected. Antibodies have been shown to lessen with time, but then there's a question how long the cells that have a cellular memory, how long those cells last and remain active and ready to kick out antibodies if we get exposed again. And that we don't know. Also, there's a question about the antibody protection for different age groups. So what the implications of this, to my way of thinking, are that a vaccine in the arm does not mean returning to normal, okay? At a recent CME conference at L&M, Zooming, of course, I said that given my age and being a male, I thought I would be masking for months after the vaccine. And the professor's comment, she said, "You're absolutely right. We'll be wearing masks for a long time." You understand the point that we can't assume because we've got a vaccine in our arm, we can just go back to normal, because we just have no good knowledge of how effective it is and how long it lasts. Let's see here. Vaccines vary in their duration of efficacy. So the flu vaccine, the reason we have to get vaccinated every year for the flu, is about 5 months. That's also a reason that it's not recommended to get it on September 1, because it might sort of poop out by late January. So the recommendation, at least from my primary care doctor, is to, you know, wait till you hear some hint of flu and then get it, i.e. usually in October. And hopefully, fingers crossed, that will cover us for the flu season. Some vaccines are 10 years, the pneumonia vaccine, but you can argue that's different because pneumonia is a bacterium and we're talking about viruses. The polio vaccine, I think, is for life. I don't remember ever getting revaccinated for polio. So there's wide variety, and we don't yet know what the new shingles vaccine will do. So there's wide variety in vaccine efficacy and duration. Because of the rollout time and questions of efficiency in efficacy in our age group, I was talking to a friend and I said, I won't be in the office, I don't think, till July 1. I have a relatively small office with poor ventilation. And I said, and her response was, I think you're being optimistic. So what that means, and by the way, this obviously won't be the jolliest of talks. I try to get some laughter if I'm Zoom talking, but it's going to be tough. For example, in terms of what my very bright scientist friend said, I'm saying don't hold your breath counting on in-person high holidays for next year. I know we said this year on our Zoom high holiday, you know, that, well, next year, you know, we'll have it next year in Jerusalem, next year will be in person. I'm not convinced. I will, and I'm not holding my breath. Finally, we don't know the long-term course of this virus. So the 1918 influenza petered out after 2+ years or maybe a little longer. So by I don't know if it was 1920 or so it started in America in 1918. I don't know if we were out of the woods in 1920, 21, 22, but after a couple of years, it seemed to poop out. And that may have been due to mutation of the virus to a less infectious, lethal form. It may have been because we had lifelong immunity. I don't know if that's likely, but COVID certainly is not like the seasonal flu, right? There was a thought, oh, good, in the summer, people be outside. It'll be like the winter flu and it'll be virtually unknown in the summer. Well, that certainly wasn't the case. If you remember what happened in the Sunbelt states in the summer, Florida exploded, Arizona exploded, Texas exploded, Texas and California. By the way, each state has already had 1 million cases just within the past week or two. So a question then is, what if this thing hangs around for years? That would be immensely freaky. Does that mean we'd have to get a vaccine? Well, if it did hang around for years, we'd have to get a vaccine yearly or maybe twice a year. We just don't know. So more unknowns. Further long-term issues include how many will get the vaccine, okay? So even before COVID, there were these uninformed, anxious folk who were what are called anti-vaxxers, right? They didn't want to get vaccines for their kids for various things. And I think schools and school boards are within their right to say, you get vaccinated or your child doesn't come to school. If I were on a school board, I would argue for that and I would vote for it. We are a country interested in freedom, but you don't have there's nothing in the Constitution that says you have the freedom to poison your neighbors. And I think some of the lack of communal concerns that we've seen would have the founding fathers rolling in their graves. So I think that that's the sort of thing that should happen. Now, I don't know what will happen with the vaccine. One poll just recently reported said that in the poll, 60+% of physicians and 45+% of RNs said they weren't going to get the vaccine, they would take the vaccine. Now, the poll, I didn't hear whether the poll reported that they meant they weren't going to take the vaccine as soon as it became available, and healthcare workers are virtually certain to be among the first, maybe after the military or along with the military. So my guess is I hope what it means is they won't take it maybe immediately because they want to wait till it gets into a large number of people to see if there are any rare significant side effects. But I hope that a much greater percentage of healthcare professionals does get the vaccine or vaccines, because it may be, a New York Times article spoke of a number of, quote, so-so vaccines. It might be that to be maximally protected, we might get 2 vaccines with different modes of immune generation. Once a vaccine is in the arms of millions of people, safety will be very clear, except for extremely rare side effects. Another issue discussed by Kim Tingley in a New York Times article titled, "Who Should Get the Vaccine First?" She noted the vaccine's efficacy about blocking infection does not necessarily say anything about the vaccine's effect in blocking transmission. Those are 2 different biologic issues, right? So you could be spared from getting a significant infection, but I guess what it means is you could still have the virus in your body, but it hasn't gone, into your lungs and throughout your body, and so you could transmit it. And she quoted a paper that in terms of protecting the vulnerable, a vaccine blocking 30% infection but 70% transmission could be more effective in lessening the spread than a virus that's 70% effective in blocking cases, but only 30% effective in blocking transmission. And for the FDA's approval, this I've heard from other sources, the FDA's approval doesn't say anything about transmission. The FDA's approval floor is that a vaccine has to be 50% effective. Am I speaking too fast? No? Okay. So the last long-term point is we don't have optimal testing regarding how quickly we get back results, and we don't have optimal amount of testing. Oh my goodness. Okay. Unfortunately, now cases are exploding so much, contact tracing is impossible. But a better understanding of community cases could allow more nuanced restrictions and less economic impact. Clearly, there's, as I've said before, a boatload unknown, but progress is being made. If Dave and Sandy and I compare our CME lectures in May versus the ones in October, vastly different. And that's the way of science. So implying that Dr. Fauci argued against masks by something he said in February or early March and ignoring what he said for the past 6 months reveals the ignorance of how science progresses, right? No fact is carved in stone. These are all unfolding data. Regarding the never-ending unfolding of knowledge, at 4 p.m. this afternoon, CBS Radio said the Pfizer vaccine was 94% effective in older people. But remember what I said about caveats earlier. We just don't know how it is in terms of transmission. How long, what ages, across the spectrum, because the young may transmit more than older people. And some research said that a vaccine may give months to years of immunity. That's not very helpful because we really have to wait years to see what the immune rates are from vaccines. Okay, so it's 6:57. I think since I'm now done the biologic part, would people like to ask questions, comment, critique, especially my healthcare colleagues, but anybody?
Yeah, I had a question, Dan.
Yes.
Thanks so much for your talk so far. It's been very, very interesting and enlightening. Have you heard anything about any population that won't be able to get the vaccine? Like, I don't know, cancer patients, or is there anybody that can't get it?
It's not like an attenuated virus vaccine, at least the first two aren't. The first two are what are called messenger RNA vaccines, and they're kind of clever. What they do is they stimulate the body to produce the protein that's the spike protein of the COVID virus, and then the antibody gloms on. In terms of whether somebody immunocompromised or with cancer, good question. I don't know. Does anybody else know? Has anybody else heard? No. Yeah, I think I'm guessing that's, oh, Romana.
Know that.
Unmute yourself, Romana.
So I haven't heard officially, but there's no theoretical reason why a messenger RNA virus should be dangerous for an immune-compromised person.
Yeah.
Dangerous or ineffective?
And the other thing is that there is evidence, Pfizer said, of prolonged cellular immunity, which they've only released in the last few days, that although the antibody titers do fall more rapidly, the cellular immunity does seem to last much longer.
And Romana, was I right in saying that cellular immunity is those cells that are sort of on standby to kick out antibodies if re-exposure occurs? Or Romana,
Yes.
oh, we have an immunologist.
Yes, but there's also, yes, you're absolutely right, but there are also other cells in addition to the B cells. There are other white cells and their friends that have a lot of chemicals inside that get released to kill bacteria. Unfortunately, if they overproduce, then you get inflammatory symptoms, so you don't want that. It's a very, in fact, a lot of the worst symptoms of COVID come from an overabundance of an inflammatory response, where the body kicks out too many inflammatory cells and creates inflammation against perfectly harmless tissue of your own. But yes, primarily it's standby cells.
And what Romana is referring to, in one thing I think that you're talking about, Romana, is cytokine storms.
Yes.
But there's also been some research saying that that there can be antibodies produced that lead to like an autoimmune attacking of the body.
Right, and the autoimmune attacking of the body is potentially a long-term issue. So it may exacerbate the long haulers issues.
Right. Let me just mention, yes, I will in a sec. Let me just mention while I'm thinking of it, one very nice piece of data about biology that I didn't mention, and that is the decreasing death rate. The cases are going up, so the total numbers of deaths may go up, but the percent of people who die seems to be going down because physicians are learning more about how to treat it in a variety of ways. So that's a very hopeful thing, along with the vaccines. Ira.
Yes, just some comments. Number one, I also read about the 94% of effectiveness in older Americans, and it said there was no data at all to back that up. And it's also now not 90% effective, it's 95% effective.
How about the Pfizer vaccine?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And I checked the numbers.
Yes, I heard that too, but I think what they were saying, which thrilled my aged heart, I think what they were saying was again, this may be a shareholder's comment, but a 95% effective in older people, which would be...
No, overall.
Overall?
Yes, because I looked at the numbers.
Wonderful, wonderful.
No, there was some data specifically about older people.
Next comment is, I think I've heard that in the UK, they're going to do challenge trials.
Yes, that's right.
And for those that don't know what challenge trials are, they're going to purposely expose people to the virus after they give them the vaccine.
Yes,
you can argue whether that's ethical or not, but I think that's the plan.
So nice to give talks to bright people. It makes it so much easier, but that is a very good point that Ira's making, that philosophers and medical ethicists are raising a question. My argument would be, if people are fully informed and they are willing to perform that service and are guaranteed health insurance for the rest of their life in case they're long haulers, then I think it is ethical. The key issue is, do they understand all the risks they're taking, including the long haul risk? But the advantage of challenge trials, obviously, is you get data a lot more quickly and unambiguously, because everybody who is getting the virus has the vaccine. Did you have another point, Ira?
Yes, I have two concerns.
Yes.
Number one.
Only two?
No, I have more than two, as you well know.
Okay.
The first one is on safety. And we only have 2 months of data. And since this is a novel vaccine as well, I'm concerned about the long haul safety issues and what it's going to do to people 6 months, a year from now. And the other issue that I have is, just like the flu, where the virus mutates, in 3 months from now, the vaccines might be useless.
Potentially, I think the vaccines are directed at an area of the virus that doesn't mutate, seems to be much more stable, but that's not to say that that's an utter impossibility. I'm not so concerned about the messenger RNA, but again, I don't know. There could be some inflammatory reaction that does come up in some point in the future. So all I'm saying is there is hope, absolutely, but often the greatest hope is doing what we've been doing. Remember Redfield, the the attacked director of the CDC said at a congressional conference, he held up his mask and said, this is the most effective thing. And because it will take so long to roll out the vaccine, so just today on the news, I heard that the estimate had been by the Warp Speed folks that there'd be 300 million doses by the end of the year available. They're going to be 25 to 30 million doses, i.e. barely 10%. So just find a mask that works, get a good mask, and keep using it.
Dan?
Sandy.
Yeah, so a few things. I think it's going to be a safe vaccine in the immunocompromised population because it is a messenger RNA vaccine. But I think what they're going to have to do with that group of people is watch their antibodies pretty closely after the vaccine to make sure that they maintain and have adequate immunity to the disease itself because of the group they're in. My concern with this vaccine is the way it has to be given at an extremely cold, or kept at an extremely cold temperature. I know my experience with Zostavax, which also had to be kept at a very cold temperature, not even as cold as the messenger RNA vaccine. It really was not that effective because of the way that it was stored and given to people in different pharmacies and places. So, this is a small group of people, it's a large group in that it's a couple of thousand, but you were talking about millions of people. I think that, in many cases, probably the vaccine isn't going to be given properly. It's going to be 2 doses. And of course, then we're going to start seeing side effects. And again, it might be a small group, like fatigue was a side effect in a very small 3%, I think, of the people who got it through Pfizer. But, you're going to get your anti-vaxxers, jumping on the bandwagon with that. And you're going to find that there's going to be a lot of conflict. So, getting this vaccine out to people, getting it done properly, and then seeing how many people will actually take it. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. But again, it's a good start. And as you say, I am concerned somewhat about the fact that we're seeing these numbers thrown about, where probably the stock market might be affected by it, but we'll see just how much immunity there is. So the mask is still very important and social distancing is still very, very important. The other vaccines that will be coming on the market will be different. Some will be one shot and we'll have to see how effective they are. But there is hope for the future in that sense. I think the population of elderly, it was 94% in just the elderly versus 95 in the general population of people who got this vaccine. But again, the elderly population tend to be the people who do isolate themselves because they are concerned about getting this disease. So again, I'm not sure what the numbers will be in select groups, in the Black population, in minority groups, but yet to be seen. But it's hopeful for the future.
Yeah, just let me respond to Sandy, and then Kathleen, I'll get you. Thank you for reminding me, because just to remind you folks that the Pfizer vaccine, supposedly, initially they said it had to be stored at -103. Now it's rocketed up to -94, i.e. hardly different. Most, I don't know if any doctor's offices have at present freezers that go down to -94. I see Sandy shaking her head, Romana shaking his head, Romana shaking her head, Claire shaking her head. So I think we can take that to the bank. So that is an issue. And related to, let me remind you that in terms of immunocompromised, we are immunocompromised, right? Given our age. So that one of the thoughts I had is I would, once I get the vaccine, I'd be wanting to get 4 months later an antibody level, because I don't know how boisterous my immune system is. And I worry that it's nowhere near as boisterous as it was. The other point, Sandy, that's an excellent point about the temperature thing, because that's something else I was thinking about. Like, let's say a truck has a dispensing truck has a failure and it goes to a much higher temperature for, let's say, 2 to 3 hours, and nobody knows it. So you might be getting the equivalent of a placebo. So that is something very, very much of concern, the temperature requirement for this. Now, I've heard that the Moderna is nowhere near as bad a temperature requirement. I've heard it's like -20 something.
It's -20 Celsius, and like -70 for Pfizer. But
Oh, really?
what they're doing though is there's no truck that can get it that cold. They're packing it with dry ice. Yeah, so
Right.
if something happens, they will know that something happened, probably.
From your lips to somebody's ears, because at various stages in the transmission and storage, there could be breakdowns that we don't know about. But that is a good point. They will be using dry ice. Kathleen, you had a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood. You said there'd be 20 million doses. Wouldn't that actually only service 10 million people?
Good. Because they have to get two. I don't know.
Yes.
Would somebody tell me, are the two doses, are they identical, or is it stage 1 and stage 2 and they're different? Sandy, do you know that?
They
I
are
don't-
identical.
Identical.
I don't know, but
The two doses are identical?
Yes,
I think they are identical.
I think that, then, good point, Kathleen, then it means functionally only 10 million. And then I think it means that the only folks who'll be getting it right off the top would be some military and healthcare professionals. I mean, I think those are likely. I don't know who for sure, but I think likely that those will be the ones. Okay, is there anybody else on, or is this is it? Okay. Okay, so, Ms. Gottfried.
Unmute yourself.
You got to unmute yourself. Unmute. yourself.
Sorry,
Yeah, okay.
got me?
Yes.
Okay. You know, this is very basic. You know how they encourage everyone to do hand washing, right? Over and over and over. But nobody's mentioned the temperature of the water. Do you have the same result if you use cold water or if you use hot with a virus on your hands? I don't know.
Nice basic question. My thought is, and then I'll ask Sandy, my thought is that the soap disrupts the lipid layer, the fat layer of the virus.
Right.
And whether that's that's a good question, whether that's different. Sandy, do you know anything about the temperature of the water
Yeah.
making a difference?
Yeah, early on in the process, when people were hand washing, people asked that question, and the few little studies, of course, none of them were very technical, showed that it didn't matter as to the temperature of the water as long as you used water for 30 seconds and use soap and were careful.
Well, I thought they talk about, in my concern, I have explained to people that I have followed this story like a frightened hawk, but as everyone is indicating, there's more stuff to think about. I think just 20, I had heard it was 20 seconds to wash your hands, but I always wash for 25 or 30 because I don't fit. And so far I don't have significant chapping, but I think it makes sense to wash longer rather than a little shorter. Any other questions? Oh, I didn't even see the other side. I guess any other?
I have a question.
Yes, Deb.
Yes, this is a question about a personal protective gear. What I've read about the coronavirus is that there are 3 points of entry within the body through mucous membranes: the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. We wear masks to protect us through the nose and the mouth, but unless we wear goggles, if we're in an environment with a high contamination of the virus, is it possible to get infected through the eyes? And I keep on wondering, why aren't we told to wear goggles?
Well, let me tell you about a study that was done in China. Did I just lose you, Deb?
No.
Let me tell you about a study that was done in China early on, that what they noticed, and it may even have been in Wuhan, the city of origin, they noticed that for some reason there seemed to be much fewer people who wore glasses than folks who didn't wear glasses. So I don't know, and we'd need an ophthalmologist or an optometrist to tell us about, or does anybody know? Sandy, Claire, do you know about the question of through the eyes? What I do, oh, by the way, and also let me mention, because Deb was saying about if you go at a time of significant concentration of virus, I shop for food. I'm the food shopper in the family. I shop for food before 8 o'clock in the morning, based on the simple thinking that the more people that have been there at the store, the more aerosols there are. Droplets are the big things that go to ground relatively quickly. but aerosols may stay in the air 3-4 hours. So I think that I think it's much more safe, whatever store I go to, it doesn't matter, supermarket, any store, pharmacy, wherever. I think it makes sense to shop as soon in the morning as you can get yourself out of bed. And also I follow the McFadenian principle that if I go to a store and I see oodles of cars in the parking lot, I leave.
I do the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Now, Judy, you said Eileen or Ellen?
Eileen.
Eileen, go.
Can you hear me?
No.
Speak with amplitude.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, talk louder or speak closer to your microphone.
That's as loud as it's gonna get, so I'll give it a try.
Give it
I
a
was
try.
curious about if you, in the absence of challenge trials, how do you really know that the vaccine is effective? I mean, what do? They look at it and they see how many antibodies get produced, and then theoretically they think that's the amount of antibodies that you won't have symptoms. I mean, how does that work?
Well, the only certainties in life are death and taxes. But as one of my patients pointed out, not if you're wealthy, real wealthy. So the point is to know that something for sure is effective. Oh, good. I see somebody smiling. That's good. The only way to know for sure it's effective is, as you say, a challenge trial. And as I said earlier, given the fact of my age and therefore my less frisky immune system, I would like to get some sort of antibody level, but we don't yet know what antibody levels are protective. So the bottom line is we don't know for sure. But the mechanism of, if in science trials, if you give a placebo blinded, which means nobody knows who's getting the placebo or the real agent. If you give a blinded controlled trial and many more folks who got the placebo got sick than the folks who got the active vaccine, the reasoning is, if there's a certain confidence interval, the reasoning is that the vaccine made a real difference. But there's not 100% certainty, and you don't know, because if it's 95% effective, what if you're one of the 5%? So one of the things my wife and I enjoy and find mega restorative is cruising. But cruises, as some people have referred to them, are like Petri dishes. So I may not be cruising again. I mean, if it's 95% effective, do I want to take a cruise where there's a 5% chance of dying or getting seriously ill? These are complex questions. Somebody else had a hand up, I thought. No? Okay. Let me see on the other screen. Oh, yes. Ellen, go.
Yeah. I was in Israel for the month of February, and I was very sick for 2 weeks. And I went to the clinics, I went to emergency room and everything. And my diagnosis is that I had COVID, but because I've never been sick like this before. Anyway, I got back and I got better after a couple of weeks back and everything. And about a month ago, I had the antibody test and it was negative with numbers. I mean, I don't know, I think it was an 8. I don't know. Do you folks, do the doctors know what the numbers mean? And it was negative, but that doesn't mean I still could have had it, but the antibodies can dissipate, right?
Sandy? Unmute, Sandy.
Yeah, so Ellen, there's a chance you might have had it, but it doesn't really matter very much because we don't know how long your immunity would last. The only advantage would be if your antibodies were positive, they might want your serum to use it potentially for some reason, but whether you're, in fact, you might be better off knowing you're negative because that way you'll protect yourself more. So it doesn't matter if you were positive, you still have to be assuming that you can get it again. So,
okay.
Makes sense. If nobody has a question, I'll mention a personal vignette analogous to Ellen's. Is that okay? Sure. So we were on a cruise and we went to January of this year, January of 2020. We started in Hong Kong. We went to 3 places in Vietnam. We went to Thailand, and we came home from Singapore. And Carla came back with a non-productive cough and a fairly high fever of 103, which she doesn't typically get. And at the time she got checked, so she was tested for the COVID family of viruses, and the ER doc said, nah, it came back negative, but we don't know how good that was or how specific that test was. She also then was seen by a pulmonologist, and they noted that on the CAT scan, she had a ground glass appearance. And another physician that Carla talked with said that, I bet my paycheck you had COVID. Now, but we are doing the same thing that Sandy just recommended. We are treating her as though she is still vulnerable, or she could transmit it to me. Interestingly, I had a very mild version of what she had, but without an antibody test, and I just assume that I am vulnerable and treat myself accordingly, because this is a vaccine to fear, I think.
Well, Dan, thank you so much. That was a very interesting discussion, and we would love to have you back. I will just tell you that we've decided that we can't bump people, so we'll have you back whenever there's a date available. You can talk to Ella about that.
I'm on the schedule for 2 weeks from today.
And I thought you were talking about another date, no?
I was, but that's fine. That's fine to bump, not to push me at the end. That's fine. So 2 weeks from today, I'll be talking about psychological and social aspects of this, and I'll try to work in some of the coping stuff, because I have other things I want to say about how to cope with this mess. I'll just leave you with one thing to tickle your thoughts, and that is, what's the most puzzling psychological phenomenon about the COVID crisis? Okay, and that's the first thing that I will address in 2 weeks. Judy.
Dan, you said that the vaccine was something to fear just a couple seconds ago, but I think you meant the disease was something to fear.
Yes, I often get vaccine and virus mixed up.
That's
Thank
okay.
you, Judy.
I just want to send the right message to all our viewers.
Absolutely. I do not wish to. Carla says I'm a closet anti-vaxxer, but I don't want to give fuel to that mishegas. So thank you, Judy.
Okay,
no problem.
Yes, David.
Yeah, if I can say a word about PPE, and I know how much you're a supporter of that. As a dentist, every procedure that we do creates aerosols, so we're very highly attuned to protection for that. Every patient that I see, I'm wearing an N95 mask, eyeglasses, and a shield. And it's interesting to note that the infectivity rate among dentists nationwide has been about 1%. So we're doing a good job, and it shows that PPE works.
Yes, thank you for mentioning the shield, because that's something that one can, I mean, those are easily available, and it's a little challenging in the cold weather. Oh, let me mention something that I do with my mask to make it fit better at times. Those of you who know I had a beard, this is just wimpy stubble, and before I go shopping tomorrow morning, I'm going to shave this. The other thing is, if my mask isn't fitting as tight as I would like, I tape here, and Kathleen showed me a device that you can put on the back of your mask and pull it tighter. But I think it's important to protect both ourselves and our fellows that we have good fitting masks. And I think N95 masks, Kathleen, thank you for the tip. I got some. N95 masks are becoming more available. I'm not talking about KN95, I'm talking about N95. So I think us ordinary non-hands-on healthcare people can also get some N95 masks. And Dana, did you have a question? No, I see you, Ellen, but you've had two. I just want to make sure I don't miss anybody. Okay.
No problem.
Okay, Ellen, go.
If you just wear the shield, is that enough, or do you have to have the mask and the shield? What do you think?
I'm sorry, say that again. I see Sandy shaking his head.
Yeah, definitely mask also.
Oh,
Or at
definitely.
least the mask.
Yes, definitely. No.
Both?
A shield is absolutely not enough because
Okay.
you could get stuff coming in that way. You can disperse much more aerosol. No, a shield is only in addition to mask and glasses. I see you have glasses, so a shield is in addition to that. The problem with the shield I found is I couldn't read the nutritional information when I went shopping, and I'm a bug about that, as some
Right.
of you know.
There's something else.
Okay, and I think
Dan?
4 minutes. Yes, Judy.
I just wanted to quickly share that it all turned out fine, but for any of you that have any hesitation about a COVID test, it's not really any big deal. So if you ever feel like you are uneasy, I went to a wedding in Ohio that they didn't distance as well as I thought they were going to. So when I came back, I was tested on Monday. It's all negative, but the test is really not a big deal. For any women who have had, of course, a pap smear, it's nothing like that. It's not a big deal. It's just up your nose and it's not bad at all. So I implore people to not hesitate to get a test if they feel they should. That's all.
Okay. And Ella, thank you for the techno consults.
No problem. Well,
Ellen, quickly, because Minion is going on very
Okay.
soon.
Are the store-bought masks, the cloth ones and everything, sufficient, or should you really get the N95? I had an N95 in the beginning and it was so hot and miserable. I hated it.
Yeah, being in the hospital with COVID is miserabler. If you can get the night, and I see a physician friend nodding, if you can get the N95, I would wear it. And in terms of cloth mask, if you're going to use one, then you should get a triple layer one, not a double layer one, and hold it up to the light and see if you can see light through it. That's a test. Thank you for all your questions and comments. That's for me the funnest part of this sort of thing. And I'll see whoever comes back in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank
Thanks
you, Dan.
again, Dan, and thank you, everyone.
thank you. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
And
Thanks.
again, everyone is welcome to these talks every Wednesday at 6:30. It's the same link. So please join us.
Thank
Love
you.
to see everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very
Good
much.
night.
My pleasure. Dave, thanks for getting some of your fellow congregation.
Well, thank you, Dan. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, Dan,
Thank
from
you.
Nadine and Mark.